Hello and welcome. Today we are going to do a live social listening around the COVID-19 crisis. So we're going to be using Social Studio and really dive into what people are saying all around the world. So our agenda, we'll do a quick intro, then we'll jump straight in and see what Social Studio is saying. Then how to listen. So this is really, we've got some advice around actually as a company, what should I be listening for on social media related to COVID-19? And then finally, there's an opportunity to ask questions if you have any questions. Great. So my name is Robin Leonard. I'm the CEO and co-founder of AF Digital. I'm 6-time Salesforce certified, and I'm on my learning path, currently studying to be a non-profit cloud consultant. My background is I was a business analyst for IBM, and prior to that, Vodafone, really focusing around the CRM world. My background, my expertise around social media actually started when the business started. We actually started off as a specialist social media partner for Salesforce, which was Radian6 was the first product they had, which they then acquired Buddy Media, and then they merged it into Social Studio, what it is today. So AF Digital, we're on the Salesforce Partner Advisory Board for Marketing Cloud Partners. This board meets once a year, and we're on the board with 11 other partners, including Deloitte, Accenture, Publicis. So some really great brands. Yeah, that's a real honor to be on that board. As a business, AF Digital is a gold consulting partner, and we are also a Salesforce.org registered partner. We're a multi-cloud partner as well, so we operate across sales, service, marketing, community, and we've got some other specializations as well, like Datorama and Salesforce.org, which is the NFP side. We also have a lot of ISV partnerships, which allow us to kind of really do extra bits and pieces with Salesforce as required. And our value proposition is really 3 things. We provide CX, marketing, and technology advice. So this is making sure you're going in the right direction. The worst thing you can do is, take the wrong steps and waste a lot of time and money. So we're really here to make sure that your strategy is safe and best practice. And this is, knowledge we've accumulated over hundreds of clients. We also provide rapid transformation projects. So this is where we can help you go live very quickly with Salesforce products in an agile fashion. And then finally, we've got TeamX, which is our managed service program, and that's a hybrid service across marketing and technology services. So this is really the future of being a partner, is really being able to help you with your marketing that really has a lot of implications with technology as well. Like there's so much crossover now. So as a result, you need a partner that is kind of a crossover of those two. So Meralco was actually one of our first clients. Meralco are one of the largest energy providers in the Philippines, and every year they have typhoons that roll through and cause power outages and crises. So we, about 7 or 8 years ago, they were one of our very early customers. We helped them use Social Studio, back then Radian6, to listen in for those crises and really understand what they were and how big they were and where they were and why they happened. Then we helped them build a crisis dark side, and that was really for the purpose of putting all of their people that had outages and wanted to get updates, channeling them through to a website that could handle that volume and would deflect those calls from their contact center. So that was really great. We also helped them with a crisis playbook. So that was kind of like an operating procedure for what to do in a crisis for the teams, because they need to be prepared. Great. All right. So let's jump in to the social listening. This is really exciting. Okay, great. So now we see Social Studio. So for those that aren't familiar with Social Studio is an all-you-can-eat social media management tool. It's generally got 3 sections: publishing, engagement, and analytics. And so with publishing, it's kind of as you'd expect. You can manage your entire social calendar in one place across all of your different social accounts. And you can also track your performance by content pillar or by channel. You can report on how everything's performing. It's also got an engagement section where you can manage engagement across all of your social platforms as well in the one place. So there's a lot of efficiencies for a social media manager to not have to click in and out of so many different platforms and apps. Yeah, so this helps you conveniently manage all of your channels, and yeah, it's all you can eat. One thing that makes it particularly unique is while you can engage with all of your channels here, my LinkedIn is coming through, my Instagram is coming through, I can also proactively engage on people that aren't directing things at me. So I don't have too much that's outside, but here we've got Trisha, who has, she's actually retweeted us. And so I can start to engage on people that aren't really engaging directly with my brand. Yeah, so this is really great if you, not for my company because we don't have so much else going on except for our staff, but if you're a consumer brand and you've got a large customer database and lots of people talking about your brand potentially, this is how we could engage with those people that aren't doing it to your pages, because not everyone wants to talk to you directly. Great, so that's engagement. And yeah, finally, let's have a look at the analyze section. So this is really what I want to focus in on today. And what we're going to do is we're going to listen in for the globe, what they are saying about the COVID-19 crisis. And then we're going to zoom in and have a look at Australia specifically. And this is really exciting. What I'm about to show you is really large. It's a large volume of mentions. It's really unusual to need to look at this many mentions. And I have taken a bit of a decision to load everything because it does also slow my browser down if I have a lot of windows open. So just bear with me as this loads up. You can start to see on the top right, here are the top 50 keywords within the last 90 days. And before I start, actually, I just want to say this is 90 days ago. This is 521 million mentions. In reality, there's actually about 940, I think, from memory. What I've done in this dashboard is I filtered out non-English words. So I filtered out a lot of keywords that I can't really take advantage of personally for this demo. I was including those in the previous demos, but it's just when we get to actually looking through, it wasn't really adding value, so I decided to remove them. So this is still a lot, 521 million, over 500 million mentions. And then another thing I've done as well, and I do this every week, is we do a comparison between the coronavirus and Apple, Google, and Coca-Cola. So you can see here that Apple is actually, without coronavirus, Apple is the most popular brand, 62.4%. Google is next, and Coca-Cola is next. If we add in coronavirus, that's how they compare. So I think I've been calling this a Gapple comparison because it's kind of like a reference point for us to go, okay, is this a big topic? And yes, it is a big topic. So across those 521 million mentions, we can see that most of them, 91.8%, are on Twitter. Then YouTube, forum, a little bit on Facebook. Facebook is a largely closed network, so that number is in reality a lot bigger, but we just don't have access to see it. Nobody can see it. So when it's private, it's not accessible to public social listening. Blogs also, there's 1.1 million blogs in the last 90 days that mention the coronavirus. Yeah, it's quite interesting. 759 news stories. Yeah, so let's just kind of zoom in a little bit. So we've got the top 50 keywords. What have we got here? And this is global, remember? So we've got President, China, hard. I wonder what that's referring to. Deaths, death news, lies, cases, COVID. Trump, It's one of the biggest keywords in the last 90 days in English. Virus, professional, opinion, right? Opinion, there's a lot of opinions, aren't there? Rate, month, crisis, time. Yeah, so very interesting. I wonder what Joe Biden, Joe Exotic. What do you guys think it is? Should we have a little look? Just a little look, see. I'm probably going to regret doing this. It does, Joe Biden, we can already see him there. So little hint on this received, or on the sort, you can sort by influencer. And this means that it just kind of surfaces the more interesting mentions at the top. Yeah, so I'm pretty sure it's going to be Joe Biden, not Joe Exotic. And if you know, you know. All right. What else have we got here while it's loading? Hard positive testing, unprofessional. That's an interesting word to have there. Phil. I wonder who that is or what that is. Yeah, it's the thing is, it's a little bit faster once we go into a smaller data set. Drilling in on half a billion mentions and trying to understand what Joe means it's maybe there's a more effective way of doing it. Great, let's just keep going. So this is talking about the topics, this key topics discussed. So you can see here, coronavirus is the dark blue. That's 71.5% of mentions are just coronavirus. And then we've got the subset of categories that we've set up to listen for. And if I can just jump into how we actually built those out, just to give you some context. So each of these topic profiles in my Social Studio, this is in the back end. This is like the admin section. This is about as hard as it gets, ladies and gentlemen. Social Studio is not a very difficult to use tool, but it requires understanding what's going on. So this is a topic profile, and a topic profile is a grouping of keywords. Within one topic profile, you can have sub keyword groups, so which are actually called keyword groups. So one topic profile, think of it like one topic, and then one keyword group is a subtopic. So I have corona as a topic, and within corona, I have naturally corona as a coronavirus as a general topic. So I'm listening in for corona, coronavirus, COVID-19. I might just throw in COVID there. And that's what I'm listening for corona. But if I want to listen in for death, this is where I listen in for other keywords and corona. So we're listening in for dead, deadly, death, deaths, died, grief, grieve, grieving, kamatayan, which I think is Tagalog for death. So if you want to listen in for specific international, foreign language keywords, you can also plug them in here. Passed away. So yeah, and corona. So we're really listening in for anything that says dead and corona, deadly and corona, death and corona. So there's all these permutations that get formed by these keywords. But it's really, does it contain one of these keywords? And then it has to also contain one of these keywords, and it has to exclude one of these keywords. So you can see we've also excluded bear, because we don't want to get any mentions of corona bear, as much as we love corona bear and want to support them in this challenging time for them. They were just very unlucky with their brand. Great. Okay, so that's kind of how we've done it, but we've broken it down into all sorts of different topics. I've got a new topic here, which I'm very excited to look into, which is reopening. And this is a very trending topic. So we're listening in for anyone that's talking about reopen, reopening, reopen, reopening, relax, relax is relaxed, reopen, reopening. Maybe the relaxed, maybe they're too broad, maybe, but we're gonna just have a look anyway. So let's save that and let's jump back into the demo. Okay, great. So remember, these are the keywords. So each of these little bits is a keyword group. Remember death, that's death here. 6.2% of all of our mentions are related to death, those death keywords we looked at. Okay, I'm gonna stop saying death. That's not the best one to look at. But you can see here, we've got all of these other little itty bitty ones. I'm going to take out coronavirus because that's dwarfing everything else. So let's just have a look. Boom. Okay, I love doing that. So now we've got death. Trump is the next big one. Quarantine, testing, frontliners, hospital, face mask, education, sick, recovered, job loss, retail, reopening. Okay, this is a new one. This is a new one. 0.9% of all social media mentions are talking about reopening. And I think this is a really good news story. You can already see surfers back in the water in New Zealand, Bondi, New Zealand and Bondi, I assume. Hopefully they don't realize Bondi is not in New Zealand. We'll take it though. It's a good beach. New Zealand has declared it has effectively eliminated COVID-19 as the number of new daily infections remains in single digits. Great. Good job, New Zealand. Great. Very proud of that. Go New Zealand. Cool. For those that don't know, I'm a Kiwi, which is a New Zealander. Great. So this is really, it is quite sad though, given that corona death, like death mentions are the #1 topic. And this wasn't the same last week or the week before. This is the first time this has risen to #1. Trump also is #2. I'm going to take Trump out of this because, yeah, he's just coming up because, actually, no, this is global, sorry. He's still allowed in. It's only when we get to Australia I might take him out. Okay, cool. So we've got death and Trump as the #1, #2 topics. Quarantine, #3, testing, 10.3% on testing. Frontliners. This is frontliners is listening for keywords around nursing, doctors, etc. Hospitals are next. Face masks, 6%. Education, 5.8%. Sick. Yeah, so very interesting. Job loss is 1.8% of mentions. I would have thought job loss would grow in the frequency of mentions. So that's quite interesting. So, okay, so those are the topics. And if we think of this like a ranking of order of what's the most important topics, we can see that death is the most important and Trump, death and Trump, kind of as important as each other right now. And then if we go down, okay, so this is the same graph, same key topics discussed, except we're looking at a trend over time. So this is over the last 90 days since January 29, right at the start of this crisis. You can see here that there's a little peak, January 31st, and I think this is when it was kind of first announced, really, like people were starting to talk about it as a global challenge. February 28th was a big day as well, and that's when I think it became a pandemic. March 13th was another big day where a lot of people got sick. Like this is where the Prime Minister got sick of the UK, and all of these celebrities got sick. Whoops. Okay, it's too late. I'm in here now. So this is how we can look at the overall crisis and how it's unfurled. Definitely March 13th is the epicenter on social media. That's the date when there was, in English, there were 17 million mentions. Without English, there's a whole lot more. So really important date that will always be the date in history when this spiked on social media. If we look at a macro perspective, you can also see that it's declining. So we've reached the peak of what it was, and now it's declining. I wouldn't expect this to increase again and go back to its peak. I would absolutely not expect that to happen. Yeah, it's very unlikely. So I would say that this is the peak, and this will continue to decline, and you could almost map its trajectory. So if you look at, I haven't done this before, so if this is April in the bottom right, April 1st, so that's about a month. April 1st to now is about a month. So it's kind of 8 million at April 1st, and then by the end, it went down to 3 million, 2.76. So 8 million down to 3 million is just over half, right? So it's kind of like halving. You could almost say that it might go down to 1.4 or 1.3 million after this month, potentially. So I'm just kind of hypothesizing about the volume. And there's also a correlation that has been well studied in the history of social media, the short history of social media. There is a correlation, and I can share a link somewhere, but there's a correlation between social media sentiment and sales for brands. So if I've got great social media sentiment, then I've got an upturn in sales. If I've got negative, I've got a downturn in sales. So they've done that correlation before. I think it was McKinsey, and it was about 10 years ago. If you think about this, you could also you could hypothesize that you could draw a correlation between social media sentiment and volume and the number of global cases. Potentially, there would be a correlation there. So this is I mean, it's a good thing. It's encouraging to see that the crisis is in a downturn from a social media perspective. It just means it's less people are talking about it every day. Great. Okay, so let's uncover underneath this big curve, right? We've got the big corona curve, and if we uncover that, we take it out of the equation. All of these other things start to come up. So I'll just do that again. Okay, you can see, there we go. So that's what it is, and without that, you see that brown thing? That's now popped up. So this is now the spike, and this is a spike related to hospitals. Oh, sorry, testing. Yeah, so this is also the spike for testing, and then testing is kind of diminished. You can see here this orange one. This is different to the other curves. It's very different. So if I take out some of the other ones, let me just unclick a few so we can see what's going on. All right, so we've got this orange line, which is death, which kind of rose, had a little spike, but it rose generally at the same pace as everything else. And then everything else declined. You saw the overall, if we look at the overall shape of the graph, it's got this almost linear decline. But if we look at the shape of the death curve, it's got a long tail uplift. I'm not sure what to describe that as, but it's definitely not following the same pattern as the global conversation, which I would assume there's a correlation there because you've got, yeah, that's the impact of everything. So people are talking about the impact. People are very affected by the impact, which is death. So that's that conversation. Let's take death out. Okay, and let's take testing out. Testing is big spike. Everyone's like, we need testing. And most countries are kind of getting their game together. Quarantine also, quarantine, you could actually look for a bit of a pattern here. You've got Tuesday, Friday, Tuesday, Monday, Tuesday, 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 Monday. So what you can assume here is there's kind of some cycle where people kind of wake up on a Monday and go, oh yeah, that's right, I'm in quarantine. So yeah, so that's an interesting cycle. We've seen that before. Frontliners. Frontliners is something that we haven't, I didn't have in my previous study. I grouped it with hospitals, as hospitals and nurses and doctors. Now I've split it out. So we've actually got hospitals and frontliners here. Just take out, okay. So yeah, this is very interesting. Hospitals and frontliners follow the same kind of curve. Yeah, and yeah, I guess that's pretty consistent. How about face masks? Okay, you can see face masks are a little bit slower to the table, and then they've become kind of an ongoing conversation. This is face masks and PPE. Okay, let's see where education sits. Okay, education had a big spike, and then it's had a few spikes on a Wednesday, this is a Tuesday, this is a Friday. Yeah, it's interesting. What about sick? Okay, I might have to take out frontliners and hospital, face masks, and education. Okay, this is the graph for sick. This is like, I've got a fever, I'm sick. So that's quite good. A little spike down here. It's interesting. I wonder what if there's a cycle. Saturday, Thursday, Saturday, Friday, Sunday, Saturday, Monday. Interesting. Yeah, so easy. I mean, so easy, so interesting to just really understand what's going on here. I'm going to take out sick. Let's talk about recovered. Actually, let's look at recovered and sick at the same time. Um, okay, so sick is this big one. Okay, so recovered is kind of just churning in the background. I'll take out sick. Okay, sick and self-isolation. Okay, this is recovered, this brown line. Yeah, so that's good. And that's also got the same, it doesn't follow the same pattern as a global. Remember, the global is like big up and then it's down. Recovered is an ongoing thing, I think, as people recovered, which is good, I guess. One really interesting thing, so this is a new one, is reopening. So we hadn't listened to this in previous webinars. Now this is really exciting because it's peaking. This is the new conversation. Everyone's talking about reopening. How do we relax the laws? So really good to see that curve, and that may have its own peak, right? This may not be the peak of that conversation. If you think about this conversation, every country is going to go through a reopening process and announcements and all sorts of things. So this may be the new focus of the conversation as we move forward. Um, all right, so I think we covered most of the points off there. For me, this is really the heart of understanding what's going on. Is once you've looked into all of these, you kind of get a good feeling. Okay, so we've got retail, okay, that had a big impact, but then it's declined. Reopening is growing, and e-commerce. E-commerce had a little spike. What I've been looking for is there a growth in talking about people is there a growth in people talking about e-commerce over time? I haven't quite seen it yet, but you could probably, yeah, very macro, you may be able to see it. So yeah, that's very interesting. Now, just to wrap up this global listening, let's look at the sentiment versus Apple and Google. So if we compare COVID-19 or coronavirus as a brand with brand sentiment against Apple and Google, the Gapple comparison, uh, I'm sure that's not going to become a thing, but maybe it will. So okay, so we've got actually this time around is a lot more negative than usual. Usually it sits about 40 to 45. Now almost half of these global mentions are negative. 28% positive, yeah, and a bit neutral. So if we look at Apple, Apple has slightly more positive than coronavirus. So as a brand, coronavirus isn't doing that badly in terms of positive, but in terms of negative, it's really a lot lower. So you've got Apple. Let's have a look at where Google is. Google's got a bit more negative at the moment. That's quite high, I think, from previous studies, 31.2%. So you can see they've both got about 30% and Corona's got about 28. So it's not far off in terms of a brand positive sentiment. I mean, obviously these would be positive comments of support and happiness like around the coronavirus, like they recovered, yay, things like that, which is great. I think that's very important for the world to also be positive. But there is a high number of negative mentions. Yeah, so it's very interesting when you compare them like that. Also, just looking at the numbers, 521 million versus 49 million. So you can see it's about 10% of coronavirus. Great. Okay, let's jump out of this one. Oh, actually, I'm going to stay in this one just a little bit, and I'm just going to look at the last 7 days. We're just going to have a quick squiz into the globe last 7 days. So this is since my last webinar on this topic, last Tuesday at exactly the same time. So we can see what has happened since. 40 million posts have happened. Again, English only. So I think if that was with other languages, it would be about 70 million, 65, something like that. Okay, and again, similar share of voice. That's not changing. Okay, this is interesting. So this does look quite different. Suspended bar, B-A-R-R. I'm not sure what that's referring to. Bar. Is that like bar as in the, oh no, General Barr's memo. Okay, there you go. We can't forget freedom during coronavirus. Interesting. I wonder what they're talking about. This crisis is changing so dramatically all the time, and it's so interesting. When you see the conversations evolving, it's really yeah, there's just so many conversations happening. You know, every night on the news, there's just different topics being discussed. There's evolving things. Okay, so last 7 days, top 50 keywords: forget, attorney, bar, freedom, suspended, right. You can see all of these keywords are very big, which would make me feel like it's kind of the same post that's been retweeted a lot. But that's it's interesting. It's funny how one thing can just take off. All right, I won't wait for that to load. So let's just jump out of here. If we look at the topics for the last 7 days, we've got death, number one. It's actually quite a bigger proportion, I think. Trump, number two still, quarantine, face masks, frontliners, hospital, testing. And then below that, the others like education, reopening, recovered, sick, job loss, retail, self-isolation, Duterte, who's the president of the Philippines, and e-commerce. And let's look at the trend. So last 7 days again, we've got death, which is coming down. That's a good sign. Quarantine, face masks, frontliners, hospitals, testing. So let's look at reopening. Take out some of these ones. Job loss, I want to see retail, self-isolation. Okay, so these two lines, this is for reopening and this is for job loss. So that's going to be interesting to see how these two lines correlate because they're very intertwined, right? But they're different topics. So reopening, you probably won't hear about job losses in the same post, but they are very related because as we reopen, there should be less talk about job losses, potentially. So it's really interesting. It should, and I think we kind of see this here, although it's maybe too early to tell, but this may be the moment where they almost intersect. Yeah, there's beauty in data. All right, so now we've done the 7 days. Let's jump out. I want to zoom into Australia and see what Australia is doing. So that was a global scan. So we've got to contend with Trump and all of those big things that are really kind of they're overpowering the other conversations that are happening in a similar way to you turn the news on every night and all you see is COVID-19 related news stories. There's a lot of other stuff happening. So by zooming into Australia, we get a better feel for what the Australian sentiment is. It's localized and it's a very different conversation. Yeah, so we'll just give this a chance to load. Right now, what range should we look at? 90 days. Let's do 90 days, and then we'll do 7 days, and then we'll do 2 days. So this will give us a really good view into what's going on. Okay, we'll just wait for this to load a little bit. So guys, if there are any questions or if there's something you'd like to look at, oh, I've got some questions here. Great, I'll answer them now. Okay, Irene, to what extent does the crafting of topic profiles depend on insights obtained? This is a rhetorical question. Yes, okay, great. Um, it's backwards and forwards. I think the best way, like you can kind of use assumptions in your knowledge and a bit of research to craft the structure of the topic profile and what you think it might turn out to be. But then you get into the reality of it, and that's where you have to think about it and go back and kind of enhance it. Yeah, it is an art, but it's a very teachable tactic. Like I feel like the way I build topic profiles is the same way every time. But I do see people building all sorts of weird things out there. So yeah, but for me, it's quite a simple structured process where you look at the different categories you want to measure. Good question though, Irene. Yes, and yeah, and you're right. The risks are that badly crafted topic profiles will, like, you can have incorrect keywords and be measuring two brands against each other, and you can make it look good. You can make something look positive. You can find only the good and exclude stuff. So it's very open for manipulation. So a really good example of that with one of our clients a few years back, Nikon. So we would listen for Nikon and Canon, but Canon, it could be like, it's so broad, you can get all sorts of different mentions with Canon, whereas Nikon's quite specific. So in order to measure the brands against each other, we had to have the same keywords shared between them so that we weren't really favoring Nikon, because it was kind of easy for it to be like Nikon for everything and Canon plus camera, Canon plus photography. So yeah, that's really good question, Irene, but you're right. You need to have a very structured and statistical approach if you want to do this correctly. Great. Okay, let me just continue. So we've got 5.6 million mentions last 90 days. Let's look at this curve. So this is the global, oh, sorry, Australia only. We've got the same date, March 13th, as the spike for Australia. So we shared the global. And let's just jump into the top 50 keywords. So again, Australian top 50 keywords: outbreak, family, time, health. Time. It's interesting. Pandemic, cases, Trump, country died, COVID, government, home, world, social, China, children. Yeah, so this is 90 days, which is quite a lot. We'll kind of see how this evolves as we look at the next 30. We've got the GAPL comparison, Apple, Google, similar banana, and then again our topics. So in Australia, oh, we've got Trump as number 3. It's a relief, but let's just take Trump out of Australia. Death, quarantine, education, testing, frontliners, hospital. What have we got below that? We've got sick next, face mask, recovered, retail, job loss, self-ISO, reopening, and ecom. Okay, great. Hopefully, reopening. Where is that? Reopening will come back up. That'll be at the top next time, I hope. Okay, cool. So that's really kind of how they rank. And then if we kind of zoom into the topics, and there's been a really great question. Do you think the decline in voice around COVID could be that it is not the new normal? Yeah. So that's it is now the new normal is the question. And yes, I think so. I think that's a really good point. Everyone's a little bit tired of it as well, I think. Everyone's like, yeah, we've kind of got to get on with it. Although obviously some countries have major problems that just need to be talked about. I think for kind of people working from home and, everyone's like, it's not such a big crisis as it was. Everyone's adapted to staying at home, being in self-isolation. Yeah, it's actually a good point. I will add the new normal as keywords as a keyword group for the next one, and we can see if maybe that's inclining or increasing. Great, so let's look at these posts. So again, we've got this death, which has that, it doesn't follow the same shape, but it is declining, and it does look fairly linear, right? So it's starting at almost 10,000. That was at March 25th was the peak. March 26th. That's the peak of the death mentions for Australia. So, and declining since then. And you could hope that that just continues declining. Let's take death out. And we've got quarantine, which is going, we've got a little spike there on April 20th. Education, a little spike, a recent spike, April 26th. What's the date today? April 28th. So that's interesting. And I will probably see that as I drill into a bit more, but these are the little spikes that you're like, oh, what's that? What's going on? I probably need to know about this. And in fact, you could go into any of these spikes and every day would have a different topic that caused that spike in most cases. Children unlikely to transmit coronavirus. Okay, great. So there's a lot of talk about that. There is no evidence students at New South Wales schools have infected staff. Yeah, so that's, I guess, the rhetoric that's coming out around this as we enter into this phase of reopening schools. Let's take out education. Okay, so we've got testing. Okay, so we've got that big spike. I'm going to take that out. Okay, frontliners. Now that would be an interesting conversation, but it is declining. Hospital is similar. Sick in the yellow, it's hard to see. We've got sick, a little spike on the 21st. 14th is obviously the big one. There's a recent spike on April 19th, and again, April 26th. So, but generally it's declining. But I think what you'll see is that it's declining, but it's more like a kind of slowing down curve, maybe. Okay, I'll take sick out. Face masks. So hopefully now that's steeply declining. Hopefully they've got a handle over that. Okay, recovered. And retail. Okay, let's have a look at, we've got job loss and let's look at reopening. Okay, great. So the job loss is the red and the reopening is the brown. And we can see this reopening is a steady increase. Steady increase. So hopefully that will just continue to go up. It's got a peak here on April 14th. So this may be the peak, but it may not be. It could keep going. I would expect it would. Oh, this is about China's reopening the US. So maybe just some talk about reopening, but nothing really happening. I know that a lot of countries around the world are starting to talk about the reopening. So that's really great. Okay, cool. So, and this could be the intersect, like around April 12th, that's where job losses go down and reopening goes up. And maybe that could be our big intersect. That would be quite a momentous day, of good news. Okay, great. So we've got the sentiment. You can see that it's a lot more positive. Well, it's about, remember, it's 28% for global. So it's about 6% more positive for Australian corona-related mentions. 47.6% negative is about consistent. So it's a bit more positive. So go Australia with that positive attitude. I think we actually had a really great weekend. So actually, in this section down below, we've got the topics. So we've got reopening as a topic, and there are 24,000 mentions of reopening. And then we've got top words for reopening, and then this is a sentiment trend for reopening. So this allows us to look at just this one topic and see what's going on. I've got the same for testing as well. Oh, available. Look at that. What a big keyword. Available. Hopefully it's positive. So you can see here, there's kind of this spike here. It isn't really an increase in positive, but it's not an increase in negative. It's just maybe a decline in people talking about them. And we've also got education and face masks, which is a different curve. Job losses. Yeah, so you can see job losses is a bit more negative than positive generally. But there's a few little spikes. So this will be interesting to zoom in on. You've got keywords like unemployment, agencies, losses, millions amid fired, job active, soaring, etc. So some pretty dramatic keywords. If we go back up to reopening, because this is the one I'm so excited about and so interested in, is this positive graph. You've got some negative spikes here as well, which are interesting. I mean, yeah, I think while there's a lot of positivity around reopening, there's also the other side, which is no, stop, we're not ready yet. So I think that's really the probably going to be the conversation. Should we reopen? Are we doing it too quickly? Should we be slower around it? And I think my personal opinion on reopening is, and I probably shouldn't be giving that here, but I feel like it's going to be very individualized to a local suburb. So, and you know, if there's a breakout in an area, that becomes a hotspot and that gets locked down again. You know, but yeah, that's kind of how I see it happening, because you like Singapore had they were really locked it down early, but then they had a big you know, a second wind of it. And now they have to go through a more serious situation. The second wind is much worse than the first. So I think this is going to be a careful and interesting conversation, but it's going to be an ongoing dramatic one. So this is the one to look out for, is really the reopening, because that is the answer to everything. That's what everyone needs to find out about. They care so much about going back to work. And we can see here some of the keywords: children. So I think in Australia, they're talking about sending children back first, restrictions, cases, economy, reopening, etc. Okay, so this is 90 days. Let's look into the last 7 days of the same graph. So this is great because we don't really have to change it. We just have to readjust the filter, and this will show us a much more detailed view of the same stuff, but we're looking into a recent snapshot. So we've got 422,000, which is down 14% from the last 7 days prior. So that's great, right? So we've got a big reduction, 14%. Don't know if that's changing the gap or comparison. Let's look at the key topics in the last 7 days. Taking out coronavirus as a topic. Okay, and I'll add in a few others as well. Reopening, job loss, retail, isolation, ecom. Okay, great. So we've got death, Trump. Let's take Trump out. Okay, death. Quite a big amount for death, actually. And then we've got education next, quarantine next, frontliners next, hospital, face mask, corona testing. Reopening is not so far down. It's 3.8% in the last 7 days. I wonder what percentage it will be in the last 48 hours. Let's remember that, 3.8%. Okay, great. And then if we look at the share of the share of voice trend, so taking out coronavirus, that's the big topic. Everything else is pretty tiny. But then we've got our other topics like, whoops, I didn't mean to do that, but I'll go there anyway. Death at the top, education, quarantine, frontliners, hospital. So, and you can kind of see here that this isn't going down. In the last 7 days, it's kind of pretty flat. This is today, Tuesday. So you can see how it's trending so far today. It'll probably grow a little bit by the rest of the day. Let's take out death, education, had a little spike this week, quarantine, frontliners. Okay, let's look at reopening. Okay, sick, job loss, retail, self-ISO. Okay, this is job loss and reopening. So the top is reopening, it's much bigger than job loss, which is good. I think that's good. Okay, great. So negativity, 47% negative, 34.7% positive. Just a little tip, actually, maybe based on Irene's comments, you can measure negative versus positive, or you can measure negative versus positive versus neutral, but they give you different answers, so you just have to be careful of that. If we look at reopening, 6.1 thousand. So that's really interesting. Actually, where did reopening sit? Reopening is 3.8%. Okay, great. Let's jump into looking at the last 2 days. So 1 day ago, which is today plus yesterday. This is the last 48 hours. And this is really interesting to see because this really shows you the detail of what's transpiring. Okay, we've got 81,000 mentions in the last 48 hours in Australia. While this loads, in terms of negativity, it is just adding neutral back in, 48% negative, still quite positive for the last 48 hours. At least we're consistently positive and consistently negative. The GAPL comparison, Still about the same. Okay, here we are. Here's the key topics discussed. So I'm going to take out coronavirus and I'm going to take out Trump as well. Okay, where does that leave us? So, oh, this is great. Okay, we've got this graph here. This is showing the trend line of the same keyword groups over the last 48 hours. So we've got this lull at 3 and 4 a.m., again at 3 and 4 a.m. on Monday. So you can see here, and you can see here below, here's a little conversations happening about the topics. If I take out coronavirus, everything pops up. And then this is where we see death in orange. Let's do that. Okay, death in orange. We've got education spike. People most talk about death in the middle of the night as the most common topic, unfortunately. If I take out death, you can see education, take that out. And what's this one? Dark brown, quarantine. So 8 a.m. really hit them. Frontliners. Okay, let's take some of these guys out. You can see there's a lot of these conversations happening in Australia every day. Okay, recovered, reopening, sick, job loss. Okay, so we've got recovered, reopening, and job loss. Okay, so this is reopening and job loss. So this is interesting. We've got a spike here, job loss. Let's just have a look in. It's only 88 posts, but it's a spike nonetheless. Less at 8 a.m. Today. Lebanon's Tripoli, shots fired, people injured. Oh, the economy is in total free fall. Oh no. Okay, that's no good. Job active agencies to reap millions. Unemployment rate to 4%. Can't abandon Australia's tradies. Yeah, that's very interesting. Okay, and let's have a look at reopening. See what the chatter is. So this is 9 a.m. this morning. By influencer scored, teachers and students now at risk from forced reopening. There you go. There's an example of negative sentiment around reopening. Coronavirus lockdown to be relaxed from Friday, according to Gladys. Self-isolation rules being relaxed in New South Wales from Friday this week. Australia shatters coronavirus curve. Good news. Okay, so yeah, so there's a lot of talk now about reopening, and that I think is a very interesting conversation to watch. If we just go down, so we see the reopening conversation, it's not getting bigger or smaller, it's just kind of ongoing the last day or so. Here are the top 50 keywords for reopening. Cases, reopening, evidence relaxed. Whoops, I need to click on that again. Let's just scroll down a little bit. Testing. So there's a kind of bubbling conversation on testing. Education is a big conversation at the moment because of the reopening, is my understanding. Face masks, job losses. So there is an increase in talk, actually, negative sentiment at the moment, and this is today, people talking about job losses. So if you think about today being a summary of all of these little spikes that happen every hour, that would then make a spike probably tomorrow of job loss discussion. So yeah, that's kind of about it. Is there any other questions that you guys have? I might just jump out of Social Studio and wrap this up, unless there's anything else you want me to show you. All right, let me just change screen. Okay, great. So thank you very much for listening to that live demo. I think as a bit of a takeaway, what I would suggest doing, if I'm an organization, I need to listen in for mentions of my brand plus Corona. You know, that's the most important thing because I need to know, I need to be first to know if there is an issue, if my staff is sick, if my customers are sick, if people are afraid, you know, anything to do with that. Maybe they're complaining about something and they think my product has COVID-19. So I just want to be the first one to know. That's why you should listen to it as a bare minimum. I would also suggest having a dashboard and a report. that everyone kind of has access to. They know that's a source of truth for the topic. Publishing and tracking as well. As a brand, all brands are doing COVID-19 related posts and communications. So what you do want to do is track the publishing of those and make sure you're able to report on them, which is something Social Studio provides. Engagement and making sure that you're not only engaging on all inbound across all channels, but you're also proactively engaging. So if you should be listening for people talking about your brand, and if appropriate, reply to them or help them. You know, maybe they're complaining about you, maybe they hate you, maybe they are talking about how they've got corona from you, you know, but they didn't direct it at your page. So you need to be listening for that so you can address it. Real-time post reports. So this is another feature where you can just set it up so if there is a mention that you get notified straight away. And then finally, a PDF report, like a weekly dashboard, you can automatically send out to your team. So anyone that does need to know, they should just get this sent to them. They shouldn't have to log in to access the information. And you can see here on the right, this is actually how I listen for my brand, is listening for coronavirus, corona, COVID, whatever, and all of my brand keywords like AFD Cares, AF Digital, AF Digital Social, and excluding any non-relevant keywords like bear. AF Digital does have a free package. If you're availing of the free Social Studio from Salesforce, please talk to us and we can help you get set up for free. Great. So if there are any other questions, please feel free to add them. And if there's anything you'd like me to focus on next time or you'd like to look at, yeah, please let me know. Definitely going to add the new normal thanks to Irene. It's a good keyword group. Great. Well, thank you very much, everyone. So don't hesitate to reach out to me if you have any questions or if you'd like me to talk through anything. Yeah, more than happy to help. Thank you. Bye.